When a woman is found murdered in an alley on New Year's Eve, her death would uncover a complicated plot for revenge. This is the Monique Baugh story. Hi, Amy.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Do you know that this case airs the week of Thanksgiving?
That's not possible.
Or like around. It's like around Thanksgiving. I just realized like it's happening. We're full on. I feel like we just started school and now it's already fall. And when I think about Thanksgiving,
the semester is almost over.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Wow.
I love the fall. Do you? I love the air, the sweaters, the food, Halloween, everything about the fall.
You're supposed to be coming pumpkin picking.
Oh, that's right. I just have to run those dates by James. I forgot. Yes. Okay. Thank you for reminding me. This is really like my time to shine. I'm not a summer girl. I know you love the summer, but I hate the heat.
No, I like the fall. I'm all fall also.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, we are going to pumpkin pick soon.
Yeah.
So before I start, fantasizing and planning my fall meals, let's discuss the episode that I chose for today. I came across this episode when I was researching a different one, which we know happens to both of us a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. All the time.
Now, I'd never heard of Monique, but when I started digging into the events that surrounded her attack and her murder, I was really surprised. It almost seemed like a movie, but it's not. It's real life. And I think the story has a couple different themes that I'm looking forward to discussing. And particularly since they involve a part of the justice system I'm very familiar with. I don't want to say more than that because it'll give it away. So I'm trying not to.
Okay. I know. I know it. I won't say it though.
No, you might not.
Okay.
We'll see. But before we break down the system and the themes, let's meet the woman at the center of our case. Monique Latrice Baugh was born to Wanda and Frank Baugh and raised in Minneapolis. She was an only child to Wanda, but had siblings on her father's side. I couldn't find too much else on her background. However, in 2019, at the time of events we're discussing, Monique had two daughters, 1-year-old Legend and 3-year-old Legacy. Monique lived with her boyfriend and the father of her children, John Mitchell Momo, who was a locally known rapper. The pair also lived with her mother. Monique loved her children and was described as a devoted mother by all. She had worked as a server for several years, but in 2019, Monique had started a career in real estate. By all accounts, she was an excellent realtor, made possible by her extremely personable and friendly demeanor and her driven work ethic. So when she got a late-night call from an unknown number to show a house the next day, which would have been New Year's Eve, she readily agreed, even though she had prior plans to go out with her cousins for their annual cousin night, as they called it, which they thought was really cute. But she didn't want to pass up on this opportunity. So on New Year's Eve of 2019, Monique had John watch their girls while she headed across town to the upscale neighborhood of Maple Grove for a 4:30 p.m. showing. On the way, she called her cousins to let them know she'd be a little late, but she was looking forward to their annual hangout. But hours later, Monique still had not shown up to cousin night, and her family was getting very concerned. She wasn't answering her phone, and the only correspondence that anyone got from her was a very generic pre-programmed text response to a colleague text message. Like one of those, when you hit it, like, can I call you back? Or I'm busy. Mm-hmm. Okay. But that was the only message. Unbeknownst to her cousins, around 5:30 p.m., a masked intruder entered the Baugh home and shot John Momo several times before quickly fleeing.
What?
Yes.
The children were left unharmed?
Yes, but they were home.
Oh.
Now, as you said, the children were unharmed, but they were in the room during the shooting.
How old were the children? Sorry,
1 and 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, though John was badly injured, he was able to dial 911 and get help.
Good.
Around 6:15 p.m., Monique's mother arrived home to find her son-in-law in a pool of blood in the upstairs bedroom. I guess he was still awaiting 911. First responders arrived shortly after, and as I said, he was taken to the hospital. But as law enforcement asked where the children's mother was, Monique's mother replied that she had no idea. She was supposed to have been with her cousins at that point. but she'd never shown up and nobody could get a hold of her. As inquiries were made about the house showing she was scheduled to be at, they made a very strange discovery.
It seems to me that her being missing might appear as though she is the offender
Right.
at this point. Is that correct?
Maybe on the outset, I think
Yeah.
that maybe that was the concern.
That's why police were asking where she was, probably.
Exactly. However, a couple of things struck them. Like they were making some discoveries. One was that Monique's house key was on the living room floor of her home, and it shouldn't have been there because, as her mom said, it was always with her. She always had it attached. So if Monique wasn't there, that key, it was odd that her key was out there without her. And you might say someone might have forgotten their key, but her mom said, no, it's weird. I'm telling you, it's always attached to her. And it kind of seemed like a bad omen that no one could get in touch with her, especially since not long after discovering that key and discovering John's injuries, word came that Monique had been found in a North Minneapolis alley, and she was dead. She was shot twice in the torso and once in the face, her hands bound behind her back with Gorilla Tape.
Whoa. And that sounds personal, too.
It does sound personal. In the snow next to her body were some shell casings and a half-empty realtor lockbox, which we'll get to in a bit. Monique's mother was devastated. Her daughter had been murdered, her son-in-law nearly murdered in their home, and her two tiny granddaughters there had just lost their own mother. This was a real tragedy.
Were they able to say if this happened on her way to the showing or on her way out of the showing?
We'll get there.
Okay.
The evidence will show. For investigators, it was obvious that the Baugh family had been specifically targeted, but by who and for what reason was a complete mystery at first. They did have some physical evidence in the shell casings and that lockbox, as well as a lead, whoever had called Monique to do the New Year's Eve showing. They also had 2 crime scenes to process, which meant comparing evidence at both to see if there are any consistencies that might tie back to the killer or killers. And there were quickly some matches. For one, all of the shell casings from both scenes were .45 caliber rounds.
Is that a common type?
It is common, yes. But again, they're just starting. This is like what they can initially compare. They also had some surveillance footage, though. And the surveillance footage showed a U-Haul truck with Arizona plates near both crime scenes. Monique's BMW was located at the house she'd been showing, and near it, officers also found the other half of the broken lockbox that had been with her body in the alley. It was enough evidence to make a good start, so detectives began tracking down the plates and pulling other surveillance from the area. And the surveillance outside the for sale house would reveal a very disturbing scene. The surveillance captured the U-Haul with the Arizona plates circling the house twice. On the second round, the U-Haul stopped, a passenger exited and walked into the home, staying inside for about 10 minutes or so. Then the driver exited and also walked into the home. Though this footage was grainy, it seemed clear that these were 2 larger males. Then it captures the garage door opening several minutes after the driver went in, with these 2 men pushing Monique outside into the truck. So that's caught on camera.
Oh, wow.
She was clearly there waiting for her clients, and this was the trap.
How far was the alleyway from this house?
Yeah, a couple miles.
Okay. So it wasn't walking distance.
No, it wasn't.
I initially pictured it. Okay.
No. I just thought about Monique, and sometimes when we cover these cases, I think about like the moment, the actual terror of being pushed into a U-Haul truck. You know, it's like that fear is what resonates with me.
Yeah.
Investigators wanted to find out who these 2 men were. And luckily, they had one survivor in this case. John Momo, he survived his attacks.
Good.
So the investigators went to the hospital where he was recovering from the shooting.
Where was he shot?
I don't know exactly where he was shot. I do know that it was serious. It wasn't like in the hand or a graze of a finger. I do know that it was serious, but he did survive. The police told him that Monique had also been attacked. He didn't know, and so they informed him that she did not survive. which was shocking and devastating, as you can imagine. He told officers that he had said goodbye to Monique the night before and that he was home alone with his 2 girls. And when he was home alone, he said that evening, his front door opened, even though it was locked, and someone entered his home.
Because they had Monique's keys.
Exactly. And that's why the key was out of place there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
John said that he was upstairs in a room with his sleeping daughters when he was shot several times. He was shot at least 3 times. When asked if he could see the shooter, he said that the shooter had on a black ski mask with one eye cutout. So what I mean is, instead of having like the 2 cutouts, it was just one like oval that exposed the eyes, but that was it. So he didn't exactly see his assailant. But the police dug a little deeper, asking about anyone who might have a potential grudge against him or Monique. To this question, John mentioned a man named Lyndon Wiggins, known as L.A., a local drug dealer who also was a local rapper, and he knew John through their rap label. Mm-hmm. You know, from what I read, Momo definitely had somewhat of success in the rap world, and I think he even collaborated with 1 or 2 artists who I recognize the names of. So unfortunately, John said that the pair, like he and Wiggins, were close for a while until they had a falling out over artistic rivalries. Mm-hmm. It appeared that John made some connections outside of Wiggins as he become a little bit more famous, and that kind of left Wiggins behind. I mean, it didn't seem like that big of a deal, but John said it was the only person he could think of who might have had an issue with him. But was this really enough to want him and Monique dead? It wasn't much to go on, but the police were gathering a lot of physical evidence after watching the surveillance footage. So the U-Haul's license plate had been captured by a reader. So investigators were able to locate it at a business in Ramsey County. And upon inspecting it, it smelled like bleach, and it contained 4 pink acrylic fingernails, which matched one found in the house Monique had been abducted from.
Okay, it's pretty strong evidence.
Yeah, the police felt confident that Monique had been in this U-Haul and likely killed in the U-Haul, and her body disposed in that alleyway. So they went to the renters of the U-Haul, and the renters claimed that they weren't even driving it, that their drug dealer, a man named Cedric Berry, asked if he could rent him a U-Haul in exchange for heroin. Okay, and then some connections started to click. So one of the officers watching the surveillance knew that Cedric Berry had a cousin named Barry Davis. That's right, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, I know. And that these 2 were connected to none other than Lyndon Wiggins.
Oh.
The rapper who had the problem with John. So they found text messages about this label feud, and they began to dig a little deeper. They also discovered that Lyndon Wiggins had sustained a raid on one of his drug houses and believed John Momo had been the one to report it.
Oh, so now there's even more motive.
Yes, exactly. So they were beginning to suspect that Lyndon Wiggins did orchestrate these attacks because of this dispute with John, so as an act of revenge. But why Monique?
I mean, I would say to get the key, but why couldn't they just break into John's home?
I know. I think that Monique was lured to the residence under these false pretenses solely to obtain her house keys.
And why kill her? Why not? Like, I know, I guess. They could have incapacitated her.
I know. This seems so senseless. But basically, Cedric Berry wanted to access the Baugh home without raising any suspicions. They wanted to make sure that they executed Momo. This wasn't about harm or sending a message. The heartbreaking reality here is that Monique had no connection whatsoever to this conflict. Yeah. And even this conflict would be senseless, but her death was entirely avoidable. Mm-hmm. But now the police would have to verify all the information given by some, might I say, unreliable players. They would begin with the 2 hired killers, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis.
Let me guess, everyone's going to turn on everyone.
Well, not exactly. But as a side note here, Cedric Berry had a very long criminal history.
Not surprised.
No, with several drug arrests, assault, robbery, and manslaughter as well. So he was what we call a lifelong persistent offender.
Mm-hmm.
The police took Cedric's vehicle into custody as well, and a search revealed some damning evidence there. The gorilla tape in his car matched the tape that had been used to bind Monique's wrists. Also, a ski mask with one hole in the eyes was found, just like the one Momo had described his assailant wearing.
You would think a career criminal would have done a better job of getting rid of evidence.
Actually, I wouldn't, because he's always caught, so...
That's true. That's a good point.
Keeps getting caught, but you'd think he would have learned a lesson. And of course, this is always a part of these plans, but Walmart surveillance showed Cedric and Walmart purchasing bleach, ammonia, and other items related to cleanup.
We should start a podcast on people who were caught
On Walmart.
by surveillance at Walmart buying either like rope or gloves or bleach. It has come
shovel.
up time and time again. Yeah,
We
shovel.
would have
Yep.
so many episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So he's caught on surveillance. His cell phone records were also linked to the crime scene, and his were not the only ones. Cell phone records would also reveal a shocking discovery. When police got Monique's phone records, the call she'd received about that showing on New Year's Eve was from a woman named Lisa Pulowski. However, this person didn't exist because it was a burner phone.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a message. And one of the officers listening to the recorded call thought that he recognized the woman's voice because she was really Elsa Seguro. And who was Elsa? She was a probation officer.
His probation officer?
So I couldn't verify that. Some sources suggested that that's how they met. However, regardless, she is law enforcement. And that's how the police officer recognized her voice, because he'd worked with her probably on another case.
Whoa. I wonder what she got in exchange for doing that.
Well, it turns out that she was dating Lyndon Wiggins. She was dating a career drug dealer.
Wow.
So this was a hell of a discovery. This is, remember I said, an institution I was familiar with?
Yeah.
was
That's why
talking
I knew it had to do with probation.
I thought you were going to think it had to do with like bail or plea bargaining.
No, I know you were a probation officer.
No, I know. I don't know. So Elsa was approached by the police. And while she didn't exactly deny making this phone call for Lyndon, she said that she had no idea what the call was really about and that she wanted a lawyer. But she did admit to the call before she asked for a lawyer.
Oh, okay. So it is possible that she thought that her boyfriend just wanted to see this house or just to do him a favor and make an appointment.
Here's why it's possible, because records showed that Elsa had a long history of helping Lyndon in his drug business, making calls for him, renting a condo for him, renting vehicles to transport drugs, etc. So she had definitely aided him in his drug business.
So she maybe didn't know it was for murder, but I'm sure she knew it was for criminal activity.
Yeah, well, we'll see which way you argue that. For the call to Monique, she claimed that Lyndon had instructed her to make this call, make an appointment, and to use a burner phone. But again, claiming she had no idea what it was for. So Lyndon Wiggins was also brought in for questioning. But he denied involvement and requested a lawyer pretty quickly. No surprise there. And he was arrested. All four of these people, so Cedric Berry, Barry Davis, Lyndon Wiggins, and Elsa, opted to take their cases to trial.
Wow.
Yeah.
And no one turned on anyone.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that, because I think the trial strategy, they did kind of turn on each other. I'll explain that more in a minute. But let me just say, in 2021, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis were convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and attempted murder, and they were both sentenced to life without parole. Great. Now, they both maintained their innocence, and despite the evidence against them, claimed no involvement in the crimes. In fact, listen to this. At his sentencing hearing, Cedric said the following: "My condolences to the Baugh family. I hate you guys had to go through this, and I will always pray that the truth comes out. Miss Baugh, I hope she gets relief. Today, she didn't get it because justice wasn't served." There was a lot of evidence against him, Amy.
What about the other one? Was the other one also sticking to his guns?
Correct. They were saying that they were not the people in that surveillance, despite what the evidence showed. Actually, I forgot to mention, too, a police officer who viewed the surveillance recognized also Barry Davis. He knew him. He knew his stature, his gait, his walk. He actually was able to say, I know who that is. They're cousins. That's the two of them. That wouldn't have been certainly enough evidence, but Monique's mother dismissed these statements as ridiculous, saying that, quote, they will spend the rest of their lives in jail and they won't have an opportunity to do this to anyone else's mother or loved one ever again, after telling the court about the last time she kissed her daughter goodbye. Now, Shante Berry, who is Cedric's wife, appeared to have some limited involvement after the crime. So I don't know if she helped with an alibi or something of this nature. She was, however, implicated, and she also received a sentence of probation. I believe she took a plea. Elsa Segura's defense at her trial said exactly what I stated earlier. So she did turn on Lyndon, that she made a phone call for Lyndon Wiggins that got Monique to the home, but that she had no part of a murder plot or did not believe that it was murder. And in fact, she believed the call was related to his drug business.
She had no choice but to turn on him. It was her voice.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like she had to explain. I guess she could have said somebody else told her to do it, but.
She could have. What I can tell you is that the jury didn't believe her. She was convicted of kidnapping and murder and sentenced to life in prison.
What?
Yes.
I'm sorry. How is there evidence to support a kidnapping and a murder charge? I understand maybe accessory, but she was sentenced to murder?
Yeah. Well, she was a conspirator. They're saying her level of culpability is the same.
I don't agree with that at all.
Okay. Well, hold your thoughts on that for a minute, because there's going to be a development, okay? While I couldn't find Lyndon Wiggins' exact strategy, it did not appear that his defense was one that centered around a claim that he wasn't involved. Rather, the arguments were more about his knowledge and intent. So maybe he was unaware of the murder, but, sent them out for a scare and then they went rogue. He also challenged certain evidence, such as his cell site information. So specifically, he challenged the use of cell site information. His attorney argued that authorities had an improper warrant. To further this claim, the defense argued that the use of a confidential informant in this affidavit for probable cause in the warrant was unreliable and not sufficient to establish probable cause. So again, I think the crux of his defense was challenging admissibility and sufficiency of key evidence that linked him to the actual murder. In the end, though, his defense was not successful. The jury did not see it his way, and they also convicted him of the premeditated murder of Monique and attempted murder of John Mitchell Momo, as well as other crimes, including kidnapping, and he was also sentenced to life in prison.
When you say life in prison, anyone have the possibility of parole here?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. I'm sorry, I don't know.
No. The only reason why I ask is it comes up often when I teach. Like in New Jersey, if you're sentenced to life, that doesn't mean life. It means possibility of parole. So
I think I said it and Cedric Berry maybe earlier.
I think so earlier, but I don't know for this last person.
Lyndon Wiggins, I'm all but sure, was not going to have any option for parole.
I don't think so. Nor should he.
Right. Now, this should have been the end of the story, but as most defendants do, they appealed their convictions. And in this case, Amy, both Elsa Segura and Lyndon Wiggins won their appeals.
On what grounds?
Okay, for Elsa, the Minnesota Supreme Court overturned her conviction, citing insufficient evidence for two of the four charges she was convicted of and flawed jury instructions.
Okay, and were those charges the kidnapping and the murder?
I have to assume probably. Okay. But what happened? No, sorry. It was not the kidnapping. But I think it was the murder and maybe the attempted murder.
Okay.
But what happened is that she took a plea anyway, and she pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge in exchange for a 20-year sentence in prison, obviously with the possibility of parole. So that's what happened. Now, Monique's mother said the following of Elsa's resentencing, quote, "We were content knowing that she would spend the rest of her life in prison as she should. Today is not a good day for me and my family," which of course you can understand as the victim. Lyndon Wiggins' verdict was reversed on grounds of improper jury instructions, and he currently awaits a new trial. Of this development, Monique's mother said, quote, "It's like we're reliving everything all over again. It's not fair. It's not right." And I'm sure that's exactly how it feels to her. I mean, it's really difficult for victims' family members who were also victims to have to relive the loss over and over again.
What happened? Did Momo make a full recovery?
He did make a full recovery, and he was in the documentary that I watched for this case, which I'm going to cite at the end. It was on Hulu. It was like a 1 episode. And that was how I came across this case. I looked at the documentary series, and it was airing an episode on Savannah Greywind. Do you remember Savannah Greywind?
No.
I covered her murder. I think I might have discussed it, or I was looking at it when I covered Lissa Yellowbird. And I wanted to cover her case, especially because I want to cover cases of Indigenous women who've gone missing or been murdered. And I will cover her case eventually, but I don't know how. I just started watching the documentary on this one. I read like the description and I was like, that seems weird. Let me just watch this one. And that's how I kind of got into this. But Momo was featured in that documentary.
And he has the children?
You know, I don't know. They didn't speak about his children. I would just assume so, but I can't be sure. They also lived with Monique's mother, so I'm sure she's active and very involved. I just want to point out, too, I really feel confident that Wiggins will be convicted for a second time. And I do hope when that happens that Monique's family will find the peace that they need to go forward. All right, so that is the story, but I mean, it almost seems like this is the why part of this, right? I want to talk about this. It's a senseless murder of Monique Baugh and attempted murder of John Mitchell Momo. It's based on a music rivalry and the possible retaliation for snitching on a drug operation. Interestingly, I don't even think that Wiggins was convicted of any drug crimes. So I don't know if he got snitched on. I don't know that it resulted in any big punishment or anything like that. But this is cold. This is premeditated, calculated. The murder of Monique was to facilitate the murder of John Momo.
It doesn't make sense. And she wasn't sexually assaulted.
No. She
wasn't robbed.
She was executed. She was just executed for her key. Literally. That was it. And because maybe they didn't want to be identified, I mean, I can't imagine, even like you said, what was the purpose of executing her? Yeah. I mean, several of the players involved here, definitely Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, had criminal histories, including violent crimes. Elsa and Lyndon most definitely have criminal histories that include drug crimes and other crimes to facilitate drug distribution. This strikes me as classic Elijah Anderson's seminal work, Code of the Street, as it pertains to Wiggins' motivation. Did you think that at all?
Such a good book. That was like, did you read it for the first time in grad school or undergrad?
Yes. Grad school.
So good. I was living in New York when I read it, and I just like, it was just such a good book. Do you think people still read it in grad school?
I hope so, because it's one of the most seminal works I've ever seen. Anderson spent 7 years doing an ethnography field work, living among...
Where was he? In Philadelphia?
It was Philadelphia. Yes, it was Philadelphia. Living in the community to try to find out what was going on at the time that was driving the violent crime rate so high. And what he concluded was that there was a code of the street. And that's basically a set of rules in certain communities in which respect is paramount. It's the currency. So individuals must project toughness and command respect as their form of currency.
I mean, informal social controls. Perfect example.
Yes, right? Absolutely. And in these areas, when Code of the Street is in operation, any perceived disrespect demands a swift response, and it often is violent to maintain status.
That would be the informal/formal. It's like the informal sanction. Yeah. So I talk about that in my class all the time when we talk about deviant behavior and criminal behavior. So I don't even remember, but Elijah Anderson was talking about how the reason why the crime rate was so high was because people were violating the code.
Well, basically, they were using the code as their currency because these were areas that were so socially disorganized, so economically strained that because they have no access to financial success, the only success and the only currency they have was toughness and violence. And that was really a measure of success.
Yeah.
His book, by the way, went so far also beyond just crime into like sociological other explanations for how they were having children in certain areas. So I don't know if you remember this, but he was explaining how some of the females having children And having like acknowledgement from some of the fathers was also tied to success or status. This work just blew my mind. I just want to say it was eye-opening for me, and I hope that they are still reading it, undergrad, graduate, anything. But I do think that for Lyndon Wiggins, this I can't think of a better explanation. It's a senseless one, of course, but not as it pertains, I guess, in his world, or did. Now, the other two, Cedric Berry, Barry Davis, these were career criminals and drug users. And I believe this was in exchange for drugs. They didn't have a problem with using this type of violence and taking the life of an innocent mother or a father, or an innocent father as well. But let me also come around to Elsa Seguro here, a probation officer. And that was such a disappointment for me to hear. And it's not like I didn't think that any probation officers ever committed a crime, or, we hear about it happening with police officers at times. But I just was disappointed to hear that she was aiding his drug business the entire time. So I want to talk about her role criminologically here.
Was she incentivized other than just the fact that they were in a relationship together?
No.
Like she wasn't making money off the deal or anything?
Oh, I don't know. Not off that specific. I don't know if I imagine that he was definitely sharing some proceeds with her or spending money on her. But there are many ways to also, so you could say maybe she was financially incentivized. I'm going to go ahead also and say this is learning theory. She learns the values and rationalizations for her crime in the relationship that she had. And those rationalizations or those values overrode her professional obligations.
Techniques of neutralization a little bit?
Yes.
You said, so what would it be? Denying injury or denying responsibility, perhaps? Because she felt like she was removed enough from, especially when it came to this crime.
Appealing to her higher loyalties. She's loyal to her boyfriend, who knows what kind of future they planned. I have no idea if there was like a power control dynamic as well that I'm not privy to, so I can't state anything about that. But I also want to speak from experience here that I want to look at the organizational factors, and that some probation officers, actually many, are overworked and underpaid. And I think that probably lines up with techniques of neutralization. She could justify her behavior because she wasn't compensated appropriately for her line of work. Also, probation combined with, just so you know, when we talk about probation, also can be one of those jobs where oversight isn't direct at all times. And officers can have a lot of autonomy. So when we see jobs like that in law enforcement where there's a lack of oversight and low pay, these conditions can breed corruption and have in other corruption scandals. I do want to say I genuinely believe that she's an outlier and not representative of the profession as a whole. Ultimately, while 20 years may not feel sufficient, it is a substantial stretch of time for her to reflect on the choices that led her there.
And I'm assuming she was maybe in her 30s at the time.
She was young, so I want to say she's late 20s to early 30s. I believe that one of the things Monique's mother said was that she could be young enough to have a family still. So she was on the younger side. Okay, so last question here. Did the system get it right?
Yes, but I still think Elsa got a pretty steep sentence for her involvement, unless there's something I'm not understanding.
Well, look, I think they probably leveraged her other crimes. She was aiding and abetting in drug crimes for a very long period. So if you maybe think about the totality of her conduct. Okay,
so she was charged with other crimes as well. So that 20 wasn't just for her role in the murder.
It was the 20 on the books, from what I read, was in exchange for a plea to kidnapping. But I'm assuming that as part of the plea, they were saying, look, you've committed all these other crimes. So
yeah, that's true. And when you look at it like that, I guess it makes more sense.
I mean, it made sense. 20 years made sense to me. I was concerned also about life if she didn't know, because I did think it was possibly reasonable that she thought she was making a call for drugs, like that he didn't tell her about a murder. He's just like, look, make a phone call for me. So,
but if that's the case, 20 for a call for drugs is too much.
Probably, but I don't have a problem with it. I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah, because we also don't know. Yeah, somebody died as a result. So
I'm good with it. And I think in this case, justice, it was the best as possible under the circumstances. But as we know, no legal conclusion, no matter how fair or thorough, can really reflect what's been lost here. And that was, a mother, a daughter, and someone special to a lot of other people. So, okay, well, that's it for today's episode. Before we go, though, Amy would like to read a review because we met with our patrons the other night, and they said that they love the reviews, despite the fact that I'm starting to take some of them a little hard.
But because of that, I'm only going to read positive today. I'm going to read 2 positive reviews. Okay. We need to be uplifted today, okay?
Okay, all right, yes,
all right.
Thank you.
So
what do we have?
One is, I love listening to Amy and Meghan. They provide tons of information, present lots of cases that I've never heard of, and I learn about the legal system of the U.S. and other countries. Keep recording. You know what? We will. Thank you. We will keep recording. And then there's a bunch, but we got some really nice ones lately. Someone said that they love our podcast, but I need to learn how to pronounce things. Anyway, another one. This is from Jersey Girl in Vermont. She says, professional and interesting. I really enjoy listening. Thank you. Being a Jersey girl, I am loving all the episodes about cases in New Jersey. Remember we were saying lately, we have so many. There's more to come for sure.
Thank you so much for the nice reviews.
We appreciate the reviews. It really does brighten our day. And even when they're constructive, it's still something.
And they help the show. Thank you so much. And Amy, thank you for reading good ones today. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time on Women in Crime. Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonzo. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime. Sources for today's episode include an episode of Me Hereafter on Hulu, People.com, NPR News, State v. Wiggins Appeal transcript from 2024, and CBS News.